Good morning, everyone. It's Monday, June 14th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-kyun. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. South Korea is easing COVID-19 restrictions for indoor performances and sports events. From today, up to 4,000 people will be able to attend music concerts provided they wear masks. More fans will also be allowed in soccer and baseball stadiums. The G7 summit comes to a close with the leaders issuing a joint communique that underscores their will to further promote shared values as open societies. On a week-long trip to Europe, President Moon Jae-in is in Austria for a state visit. Moon is the first Korean president to visit since the countries established diplomatic ties in 1892. Our top story this morning, as South Korea picks up pace with vaccinations, authorities eased COVID-19 restrictions for concerts and sports events beginning today. The government is also working on a scheme to waive self-quarantine for those who have been fully vaccinated abroad. The country, meanwhile, reported 399 new COVID-19 cases Monday, dropping below 400 for the first time in more than 2 months. Chang Tae-hyun has our top story.
More people in South Korea can enjoy indoor sports events and performances starting from Monday. For K-pop and other music concerts, audiences of up to 4,000 people can attend for both indoor and outdoor events. Previously, up to 99 people were allowed to enjoy such shows. People will, however, have to keep their masks on, are not allowed to eat, must stick to their designated seat, and are strictly prohibited from shouting. And changes have also been implemented for sports events. In the capital region, where level 2 distancing measures are being enforced, up to 30% of a venue's capacity can host fans for events like soccer and baseball. That's 3 times more than the current 10%. And outside the capital area, the capacity limit went up from 30 to 50%. Quarantine restrictions have also been eased, as some people who have been vaccinated outside South Korea will no longer need to self-quarantine when entering Korea, starting next month. The exemption standards will be granted to those arriving for business or academic purposes, or for personal reasons like visiting a spouse or parents who have been fully vaccinated for at least 2 weeks. Travelers from 13 countries, including South Africa and Brazil, where COVID-19 variants are spreading, are not included in the list for exemption. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is in Austria for the second leg of his week-long visit to Europe. He will be in Vienna until Tuesday for a state visit. Moon is the first Korean president to visit Austria since the two countries established diplomatic ties in 1892. First up is an official welcoming ceremony on Monday, which will be followed by a summit with Austrian President Alexander Van der Bellen. President Moon will also hold talks with Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and attend a state dinner on the same day. He will also visit Vienna City Hall and meet other local political figures. On the last day of his G7 summit scheduled Sunday, President Moon Jae-in took part in 2 expanded sessions on climate change and the economy. There, President Moon reaffirmed his will to achieve carbon neutrality in South Korea by 2050 and stressed the need for global cooperation for free trade and open economy. Hong Yoo reports.
President Moon Jae-in on Sunday reaffirmed his willingness to achieve carbon neutrality in South Korea by 2050 at the last expanded plenary session he took part in at the G7 summit in the UK. He reiterated he will announce a stronger NDC 2030 target at the UN Climate Change Summit COP26, which will be held in Glasgow in November. During the session, President Moon explained the Seoul Declaration reached through the recent P4G Seoul Summit, in which participants showed a willingness to achieve carbon neutrality through an embracive green recovery, as well as the halt of public finance support for new overseas coal power plants and the Korean Green New Deal. He also emphasized the need to expand participation from the private sector. Following President Moon's statement, the other leaders brought up ways to try and limit Earth's average temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, ways to expand clean and renewable energy, and how to fund it all. Prior to the summit on climate response, President Moon took part in an expanded session on open economy. He emphasized the need for global cooperation for free trade and open economy. President Moon introduced South Korea's experience of fighting for democracy and creating an open society. Other participating leaders agreed that promoting a free and fair trade and open economy is crucial. President Moon also held bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Macron said he hoped to strengthen cooperation with South Korea in key technologies such as semiconductors and electric vehicles, as well as in the health and energy sectors. President Moon said Seoul also hopes to enhance cooperation in those fields with France and the EU. During the South Korea-UK summit, Moon and Johnson agreed on the need to enhance their security ties. President Moon introduced the Biden administration's North Korea policy, saying he expects the regime to respond positively as South Korea and the U.S. have expressed a willingness to open lines of dialogue with the North. Johnson also reaffirmed his support for peace on the Korean peninsula. The Blue House added that the two leaders also evaluated COVID-19 countermeasures and vowed to advance their partnership in preparation for the post-COVID era. Hongyu, Arirang News.
The summit of the world's 7 most advanced economies drew to a close with leaders promising collaborated action to tackle an array of global issues in a communique. Amongst the pledges, G7 leaders vowed to donate more COVID-19 jabs to poorer countries and keep their economic stimulus programs on schedule. Kim Hyo-sun has more details.
The 3-day G7 summit came to a close in southwestern England Sunday, with leaders issuing a joint communique titled Our Shared Agenda for Global Action to Build Back Better. The leaders of the G7 countries, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and US, underscored that they will join hands to further promote shared values as open societies. The communique laid out the need for a shared G7 agenda for global action, including efforts to put an end to the COVID-19 pandemic, revitalizing the global economy, protecting our planet, and embracing shared values. First, on their commitment to COVID-19 vaccines, the G7 pledged to donate 1 billion vaccine doses over the next year.
I'm very pleased to announce that this weekend, leaders have pledged over 1 billion doses, either directly or through funding to COVAX. That includes 100 million from the UK to the world's poorest countries, which is another big step towards vaccinating the world.
On global economy, the world's 7 most advanced economies agreed to advance recovery plans, building on the $12 trillion of support that they have put in place during the pandemic. During this process, they stress no place or person, regardless of age, ethnicity, or gender, shall be left behind. Climate change was also an important topic of discussion for the G7 leaders, who vowed to increase their climate finance contributions to meet an overdue spending pledge of $100 billion a year to help poor nations around the world. In securing future prosperity, the communique also highlighted that the G7 champions freer and fairer trade within a reformed trading system, as well as a fairer global tax system. Lastly, in an effort to counter China's growing influence, the G7 leaders also signaled a desire to build a rival to China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. They shared the same view that in some issues, including the tackling of climate change, for example, China needs to be part of the conversation. But they agreed in many other areas, like on economy and trade, that the G7 is in a more competitive position with Beijing, as well as issues like human rights, which the communique highlights needs to be harnessed globally, together with other values like democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The G7's joint communique also urged North Korea to resume dialogue for the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Welcoming the Biden administration's new North Korea policy, the G7 endorsed Washington's willingness to continue diplomatic efforts to engage the regime. In addition, they called for all states to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions and associated sanctions. They also said the North should respect human rights and immediately resolve the issue of its abductions of Japanese nationals. The G7 summit took place in the southwestern tip of England, and the atmosphere of the summit appeared just as warm as the weather. Watchers say the U.S. being more cooperative than in recent years probably made the difference. Kim Dami has more.
No masks, but with plenty of elbow bumps, laughter, and warm greetings, this year's G7 was as lively as ever. After greeting one another on a specially built wooden gangway on the Atlantic seaside, the leaders and guests put on big smiles for a socially distanced family photograph.
It is genuinely wonderful to see everybody in person. I can't tell you what a difference it makes.
Though bombarded by the press, the leaders were at ease in their partition-free conference rooms, with some lighthearted moments like U.S. President Joe Biden jokingly telling journalists to leave the leaders alone and go swimming. Many observers have said the atmosphere was also brighter with the new U.S. administration as a more cooperative partner. When asked whether America is back, President Biden turned to his French counterpart, President Macron. The friendly vibe this time contrasts with the summit in Quebec 3 years ago, where Trump and Macron had some tense handshake battles. Supporting their husbands on the global stage, the First Ladies, many of whom met for the first time in Cornwall, also took time to get to know one another. At the American First Lady's invitation to visit the U.S., South Korea's First Lady Kim Jong-suk said she gladly accepted, and Kim also said it was nice to meet the Japanese Prime Minister's wife, Mariko Suga. Things were pleasant on the second day of the summit too, with a privately held beach barbecue dinner where Prime Minister Johnson's 1-year-old stole the hearts of the guests. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
For the first time in 12 years, Israel has a new prime minister. This comes after a new coalition finally unseated longtime leader Benjamin Netanyahu in a tight parliamentary vote. Lee Seung-jae has the story.
For the first time in more than a decade, a new prime minister was sworn into office in Israel on Sunday as Naftali Bennett and his new coalition unseated Benjamin Netanyahu.
I, Naftali Bennett, the son of Jim Yaakov, may he rest in peace, and Milna Leah, may she live a long life, am committing as Prime Minister, as future alternate Prime Minister, to be faithful to the state of Israel and its laws, to faithfully fulfill my job as Prime Minister and as alternate Prime Minister, and fulfill the decisions of the Knesset.
Bennett was elected Prime Minister in Israel's parliament in a razor-tight 60-59 vote, with one lawmaker abstaining. His election was made possible thanks to a band of unlikely allies coming together from different political spectrums, 8 different parties with one shared belief that Netanyahu had to go. The 71-year-old former prime minister had one last speech before handing power over to Bennett, making his future intentions clear.
We'll be back soon. We'll be back.
Netanyahu was first elected prime minister in the late 1990s and again in 2009. Over the last 12 years, he allowed the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, frustrating Palestinian aspirations for statehood. While he recently won praise for his effective fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, he's also facing corruption charges, including bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. In the face of those allegations, his support has waned over the past 2 years as he struggled to stay in power through repeated elections, which were all mostly inconclusive. Under the coalition agreement, Bennett, who is ironically Netanyahu's former chief of staff, will serve for 2 years before passing the torch to former finance minister and head of the centrist Yesh Atid party, Yair Lapid, for the latter half of the 4-year term. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk has once again caused waves on the crypto market, this time by tweeting that Tesla will resume Bitcoin transactions. He said it will accept Bitcoin once crypto miners use a reasonable amount of clean energy with a positive future trend. He made the comments on Twitter on Sunday afternoon, replying to an article in Cointelegraph, which had claimed Musk was engaging in a Bitcoin pump-and-dump scheme. The electric car company halted car purchases with Bitcoin last month over concerns about its environmental impact. The cryptocurrency jumped more than 9% on Sunday in New York, reaching more than $39,000. Turning to our global economic calendar for this week, the U.S. Federal Reserve will hold its two-day-long FOMC policy meeting, and the Bank of Korea will release an analysis on factors that have contributed to the country's recent recovery in exports, as well as an export forecast. 서은경 reports.
In the U.S., the Federal Open Market Committee will meet from Tuesday to Wednesday. Investors are keeping their eyes on whether the meeting will discuss the scaling back of asset purchases, so-called tapering, in order to ease inflation. Since March last year, the central bank has been purchasing $120 billion of assets a month, providing liquidity into the market. CNBC reported last week that the Fed is likely to begin reducing asset purchases later this year or early next year, citing comments from Fed officials. On the same subject, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said in March there was not time to start talking about tapering yet. He said the central bank will wait until the labor market and inflation have made substantial progress toward the maximum employment and its 2% goal, respectively. And the chairman added that when the Fed sees the signs of the progress, it plans to provide as much advance notice of any potential tapering as possible. Market watchers largely expect there to be no immediate decision made in next week's meeting. Instead, they seem more likely that the Fed will announce its stance on tapering in August when the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City's annual monetary policy symposium takes place. Since 1981, central bankers, finance ministers, and leading financial market players around the world have been participating in the annual event, mainly discussing current economic policy matters. On Wednesday, the Bank of Korea will release analysis on contributing factors to the rise in exports as well as export projections. The latest figure shows that South Korea's exports in the first 10 days of this month jumped more than 40% from a year ago. According to preliminary data from the Korea Customs Service, strong demand from cars, semiconductors, and petroleum products have largely contributed to the growth. Since the recent export figures indicate a recovery in the global economy from the pandemic-led recession, Korea's central bank is likely to release rosy expectations on exports. 서은경, 아리랑 뉴스.
Welcome. It's time for The World Now, bringing you some of the most interesting news from around the globe. I'm Ji-young. How about being given a rose for getting a COVID-19 vaccine? People who went to receive shots on Sunday at a medical center in India's southern Hyderabad city were welcomed with roses. The event was organized by a religious society, and the vice president of the group said it was to encourage vaccination.
The importance of today's program is that whoever is coming here to receive a vaccine shot against coronavirus are being welcomed with roses, and we are encouraging them.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the country aims to inoculate all eligible and willing Indians by the end of this year. According to health data, around 240 million of the country's 950 million adults have received at least one shot so far. A massive sinkhole larger than a football field has opened up at a farm in central Mexico. It's been growing dozens of meters daily since it was first reported on May 29th. The crater is filled with water, and the size now reportedly became over 125 meters across in some places and reaches around 45 meters at its deepest point. Experts point to an underground river being the cause, while some residents believe the sinkhole is a result of excessive groundwater extraction by factories in the area.
What has happened is that overexploitation, that is to say, the water at a certain time, left cavities. Then rainfall and infiltration generated a structural collapse.
The enormous hole swallowed a house, and 2 dogs were stranded on the edges for 4 days. Firefighters managed to save the dogs, and the Mexican government has sent in soldiers to keep people a safe distance from the rim. Did you know that there's a cat that can predict the results of football tournaments? An oracle cat in Russia is testing its possum psychic skills. Achilles, the cat from St. Petersburg, on Saturday predicted that Belgium would beat Russia in its first Euro 2020 match. Bowls of cat food with the country's flags were placed before Achilles, and he delved into the meal with the Belgian flag. Belgium beat Russia 3-0 in Saturday's opening game for their European Championship campaign. He also predicted Italy's win over Turkey in the previous day's opening match.
Good morning. Today is Dano, a traditional holiday in South Korea when our ancestors held ceremonies to pray for a rich harvest. Well, the summer heat continues today, and it's going to be hotter in central parts of the country, with highs reaching up to 31 degrees Celsius here in the capital, Chuncheon, and over in Daejeon. Most regions will be under partly sunny skies, while passing rain is in store for Jeollado and the inland regions of Chungcheongdo provinces during the day, so please have an umbrella handy. Gyeonggi-do province, though, will have very high UV rays and ozone during the day. And despite the clouds, the capital region will be similar in terms of the UV levels, so please don't forget your sun protection items today. Looking ahead, rain is in the forecast for the south tomorrow. Then it's going to be blistering hot again on Wednesday. Then nationwide rain is in the forecast for Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that'll do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and goodbye.